Hey guys, so in today's video, I'll be answering the question, how much car can you actually afford? We'll break it down by income level, used versus new cars, looking at the overall picture of your finances, and just my general tips on how you guys can save money when buying a car. Because yes, there is a lot of strategy to this, and I want you guys to save as much money as possible. So why should you guys actually listen to me? Well, I own multiple cars, two of which are paid in cash, one is financed. I'm obsessed with the financial aspect of owning cars. I'm always looking for the best deals possible. So yeah, this is a topic that I absolutely love. And you know, when you go to a car dealership and the car salesman asks you, what do you want your monthly payment to be? So many people think, oh, this is a question that if I answer, I'll know exactly how much I can afford. But the truth is, if a car salesman ever asks you that question, just know you are about to get scammed. I think there are so many myths and intricacies when it comes to figuring out how much you can afford on a car. So I really hope that this video can be helpful. So a little bit of background, the car market has been absolutely crazy the last few years. You guys saw used car prices shoot up in value. But luckily, since 2023, they have sort of dipped. Interest rates are still pretty high. They're not as high as they once were, but they're still extremely high compared to the 2-3% interest rates that people were getting during the pandemic. And yeah, overall, it's just getting harder and harder for people to be able to actually afford cars. So while the US median income has risen from $69,000 to $77,000 per year over 23 years adjusted for inflation, the price of the average car has risen way more than that. And yeah, so it just means that it's harder for people to be able to afford the car that they want these days. Luckily, I will say that there are tons of things you guys can do both financially and in your personal life that make car ownership a lot more financially responsible. And the first thing I'm going to talk about is the formulas that you guys can use to calculate how much car you can afford. Now just know that there are thousands of formulas on the web. It really depends on who you ask. So for example, if you ask Dave Ramsey, he'll tell you that you can only afford a car if you can pay cash for it right now. There's other people that follow these percentage-based formulas, and you can sort of plug in your income and see how much car you can afford using those formulas. But yeah, there are two formulas we're going to be talking about in this video. One is the 20-4-10 rule, and then the other is the 50-30-20 rule. It's really important to take both of these formulas into consideration when figuring out how much car you can afford. So first, let's start off with the 20-40-10 rule. Basically, what this says is that if you put down 20% on a car, finance it for 4 years or less, then the total monthly cost of your car should be less than 10% of your monthly income. This includes transportation costs, insurance, gas, your car payment, maintenance, and stuff like that. So what I've done is I've sort of broken this down into a chart. So on the left, you basically have your post-tax income. This is the monthly money that is coming in after you pay taxes. So for example, if you're making, let's say $2,000 per month, we're going to want to hit that target 10%, which means you're spending $200 or less on your total car payment, as well as all car associated costs. If you make $4,000 a month, that 10% is going to fall on $400. And this basically just goes up the more you make, right? Like a $10,000 income can technically afford $1,000 a month on their car costs when using this formula. Now, this is just the target amount, right? There's also the very safe amount, which is 5%. There's the semi-target, which is 15%, definitely over 10%, but still not absolutely crazy. There's over target, which is 20%. And then if you're keeping up with the Joneses, that's going to be 30% or more. Yes, there are people that spend over 30% of their monthly income on their car. You see this actually a lot, but what we're going to try and do is be financially responsible and stay far away from that. So for most of you guys watching this video, I'd say that 5 to 15% is where you want to be. And essentially what you want to do is you want to take this formula and combine it with other things that you believe in. So for example, if you believe with Dave Ramsey's teachings, you'll also want to have the cash on hand to technically just pay it off right now. Does that mean you need to buy the car cash right now and not finance it? No. And the other thing we need to do is we need to take this formula in consideration with other formulas like the 50-30-20 rule. This formula is so important because it looks at your overall financial picture, right? You can't just look at the car formula when determining how much car you can afford. There's so much context that goes around it, and we really need to be able to understand that. So basically, the 50-30-20 rule recommends putting 50% of your money towards needs, 30% towards wants, and 20% towards savings. So the portion of this formula that we will be talking about most is the 50% part, because that's the money that's going towards your needs. And for most people, a car is a need. If you have a significant amount of money being spent on other needs, then of course that means that the amount you spend on your car should be less, right? Because according to the formula we talked about, only 10% of that 50% should be spent on your transportation. The rest should be split between your housing, your food, groceries, and stuff like that. Now, what happens is if your expenses for the other needs are quite high, then that leaves less room for us to spend on our car. Conversely, if the amount of money you're spending on your other needs is actually less, so for example, if you are living with your parents or something like that, that, then yes, technically you should be able to spend a little bit more on transportation. The reason why 20% of your total needs category should be spent on transportation is just because when you look at life in general, the car you drive is not that important, right? It's about 20% of what you should be spending on your needs. The far more important things are things that actually keep you alive. So that's going to be your housing and your food. But of course, everyone is different. That is why personal finance is called personal finance. It's a personal decision. It's really based on your personal circumstances. So just know that everything I'm saying in this video has an asterisk to it. You really need to look at it in the context of your own life and just basically adjust everything we're talking about so that it fits your life. Ideally, I want you guys to come up with a custom formula. For most people, I don't think you need to have the cash on hand to pay off the car fully. That's a very, very conservative approach. And I think that thinking is a bit outdated. But let's say you don't have 20% down and you want to put 10% down on your car. In that case, I think a lot of people would think, since I'm putting less money down on the car, I can technically afford to pay a little bit more per month. But my logic is actually the opposite. So if I'm only able to put down, let's say 10% on the car, then I shouldn't be spending 10% of my monthly costs on the car. I should be spending, let's say 7%. And that basically is because if you don't have 20% to put down on the car, that probably means you have less money for your emergency fund. And that means you do need to be more conservative with how much you spend. On the other hand, if you have enough money to pay the car in full right now, then maybe it makes a little bit more sense to spend 15% of your income on your car. Now, I do want to give you guys a warning because the sale price of your car is actually going to be significantly higher than what it says on the sticker. For example, if you agree to buy a car for $20,000, that's not all you're going to pay. Generally, you're going to pay about 10% on top of that. And this does depend on where you live. That's basically due to different state taxes and stuff like that. But in general, expect to pay about 10% on top of the sale price of the car. So the more expensive the car, the higher that amount is going to be, of course. Now, if you guys go to a dealership, they'll actually likely push you towards financing that's longer than 48 months, right? It's very standard for people in the US to go with 60 and 72-month financing options. The reason why they can push you towards this is because it can actually lower your monthly payment and make it seem like you can afford more car than you can actually afford. That's why when the car salesman asks you, what do you want your monthly payment to be? That is a trap. And I know for sure that they are going to try and, push you towards longer financing options so that you actually go for the more expensive car. What I recommend you guys do is just find a free online loan calculator, plug in the numbers with your custom formula that you have made based on this video, and use that to figure out how much car you can afford. And if you don't want to look at it from a monthly payment point of view, I recommend just don't spend over 30% of your yearly income on your car. So for example, if you're making $100,000 a year, don't spend over $30,000 on the car. If you're making $50,000 per year, don't spend over $15,000. So yeah, how much car you actually can afford depends on what rule you go with, but just create your custom rule based on all these different things. And that's probably the best way to do it. Now, obviously some cars are a better buy than others. Some cars appreciate a lot faster. Some hold their value extremely well. And this all really boils down to the depreciation curve. And this is different for every single car on the market. What I recommend for most people is you want to buy a car that's about 2 to 3 years old. Now, 2 years ago, this wouldn't have been my advice since used car prices were so high. They're so inflated compared to new car prices. But now that used car prices have come down, I think this is the smart strategy. The reason why 2 to 3 years is the sweet spot is because by this time, the depreciation curve has sort of leveled out. Usually new cars, you see a pretty big hit in the first year. You still see a pretty big hit in the second year. And then by year 3, that's when the depreciation starts to level off. Let's take a car. Let's say it costs $30,000 new. By the end of year 1, let's say that car is worth $24,000. So that's $6,000 depreciation in the first year. Let's say after the second year, it's now worth $21,000. So we have $3,000 of depreciation in that second year. And that year 3, it's only depreciating about $2,000 per year. That's essentially why buying at year 2 or 3 is the sweet spot for depreciation. You sort of let that first owner take that big hit of depreciation, and you're basically swooping in once that depreciation has sort of leveled off. Now, I will say this only applies if you buy a dependable brand like, let's say, Toyota or Honda. There are tons and tons of luxury cars out there that depreciate a ton, and you might be thinking, oh, I can get this $80,000 car for $20,000. The reason why it has depreciated so much, though, is because of the maintenance costs. Because trust me, if that car didn't cost any money to maintain, there is no way it would depreciate that much. It'd still be worth closer to the original amount. And that is really why it's so important if you're trying to save money to buy a reliable brand. Yes, those cars depreciate a little bit less, but the cost to actually maintain that once it's in your possession is so much less. And that makes the overall cost of ownership very low compared to some of those crazy luxury cars. Another mistake that a lot of people make is they don't actually calculate what their total cost of ownership is going to be. There are so many factors that are well beyond just the monthly payment. So for example, if you are a young driver, your insurance is going to be more. I really recommend you guys go to a broker, get some quotes from different companies, and make sure that they are car specific, right? Some cars, they're going to be extremely expensive to insure, and some are going to be extremely cheap to insure. It also depends on where you live, right? So if you live in Miami, then yes, the cost to insure pretty much any car is quite high. And also keep in mind your driving record. So if you do have points on your driving record, that does mean that your insurance rates are going to be higher. And just really know that there are so many additional costs to owning a car beyond just the monthly payments. And yeah, that is just a mistake that a lot of people make that makes them think they can afford cars that they really can't. Now, this is a video that applies to most Americans, but these formulas, they don't really work if you make a lot of money. I'm really not going to talk about that too much in this video because we could really talk about this topic for 2, 3, 4 hours and I still wouldn't be done talking because there's just so much stuff. There are so many different situations. There are so many different classes of cars you can buy. And so I do want to say that these rules, they don't apply to everyone. If you guys thought this video was going to be a very simple, oh, this is exactly how much car you can afford based on a few numbers, then sorry to say that's not the case. But hopefully it gave you guys enough context to sort of do the math on your own, figure out what you are comfortable and feel responsible spending on your own car. And yeah, as a car lover, I do want to say that for people that really love cars, yes, you only live once. Having a fun car can be sort of like investing in your own experiences. For some people, they absolutely don't care what car they drive as long as it gets them from point A to point B. And yeah, this is just a hugely personal decision. I'd say for most people, they sort of go emotional with how much they want to spend on a car. Basically, the whole takeaway is there are formulas you guys can use. You guys can use more logic when it comes to determining how much you can afford. And I really hope you guys can do that before buying your next car. I also have links to some of the resources we talked about in this video in the description down below. And yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Hopefully you guys got some value from it. If you guys did, make sure to hit that like button and also subscribe for more content just like this. This whole channel is dedicated to helping you guys live more financially successful lives. Thank you so much for your time, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.